the webinar is about conscious leadership for the future. We would like this webinar to be a conversation around this topic, and Stephen and Kate are going to talk about our approaches and how we view this new way of leading emerging in our programs and on Purpose and Nomad Academy. So I am also from On Purpose. I work as a marketing and community manager. My name is Camila, and welcome you all, and please use the chat. Stephen has a master's in psychology, is a professional athlete, and is the head of and the program director at Nomad Academy. And Kate is a fellow from On Purpose. She will explain more about our associate program to you. And she used to work in trade publishing, and now is the head of recruitment and business development at On Purpose. So now I think Stephen is gonna start talking about Nomad Academy.
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone, and hello from Kuala Lumpur, where it's 1:30 at night right now. So I'm very happy to be with you. Yeah, just to give you a very short introduction on what we do as the Nomad Academy. I'll keep it very, very short because we're here obviously to hear about leadership. Really what the Nomad Academy is all about is that we create tribes of young professionals, normally up to 30, who we take traveling for about 3 months to 3 different countries. And whilst they're there, we teach everyone the skills and mindset for what we call an entrepreneurial career. So when you're on program, there's really an online and an offline part. So the online part is normally about how to start a business or how to become a UX designer or a data scientist. And there's a whole offline program, which is all about mentoring and predominantly about workshops. That's really what we do here. And when we talk about an entrepreneurial career, we really mean people that start their own business, or people that go freelance, or people that go work for a startup. And the main thing we try to focus on this program is to really figure out what makes you come alive, like what works for you and how do you start working from that position. And that's in a nutshell really what we try to do here on these programs. And that's also the reason I'm in Kuala Lumpur right now, because I'm program directing here as the senior program director, leading this group through a trip in Asia. So that's in a nutshell really what we are doing here. Is that good enough, Camilla?
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
We'll be talking more soon, so maybe Kate now introduce.
Yes, so hello everyone. My name's Kate. I co-lead the associate program for On Purpose in London. And like Stephen has just done, I'm going to give you a couple of quick little bits of information about what we do and I suppose why we're here on this webinar, where we thought leadership was a really interesting and important thing to be talking about. So On Purpose, we are, as it says in our name, all about purpose. And we are a social enterprise, and we have a mission to create an economy that works for all, by which we mean an economy that is more equitable, so fairer, and more sustainable over the long term. And we deliver on this mission by creating leadership for the impact economy. So we pull people into what we call the impact economy, which is essentially businesses, charities, other types of organizations that are using their activities, all of their work, to create positive social or environmental impact. And through our associate program, we bring new people into this space. So we are a leadership program, and we also help people translate their careers and move them into a new space. And yeah, we essentially, we bring people in, we give them the experience we think they need, the support and the inspiration to take their experience and skills from whatever background they have. That might be consulting, it might be financial services, it could be advertising, engineering, the charities sector, international development, whatever it is. Those people, if they're high potential, we will work with them, bring them into this space, and then help them translate their career into something that actually creates impact and does work that really matters. So a quick word on what the program looks like, I suppose. So we work with people who have on average between 5 and 7 years work experience. So people who've climbed some kind of career ladder, generally in the kind of corporate, commercial, private space, and now want to move and do something that, work that actually matters. And we pull them in, and we, over the course of a year, we deploy them into 2 different organizations that create social or environmental impact. So you actually go on and work in 2 purpose-driven organizations. We have a big learning and development program, of which leadership is a major part. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. We have support through mentoring and coaching. And all of this happens with a cohort of kind of 16 to 18 people doing it at the same time as you. So you get a really nice like-minded gang, and then become part of a much wider kind of on-purpose community. And we exist in London, and then also in Paris and Berlin.
Great, thank you. So now we are gonna focus into the topic of leadership, and Stephen is gonna start, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
Can you take the lead?
Yeah. Yes. No, that's good. Yeah. So to kick it off, in deciding what I was going to talk about specifically this evening, I realized that I think we are living in a time where immediate action is required, and I think especially looking at the state of our societies and our planet. So therefore, I was going to focus more almost on the verb leading as opposed to leadership, because I think on a theoretical level will be explained what we need to do. But as we also saw in the picture, it starts with the self. It starts with the human. So really, what is it that I can start doing today to create the changes that are so dear to us? So as Camilla said, I'll be drawing on my experience as a professional athlete, and predominantly on my experiences also as leading groups of young professionals here in Asia and Africa, which is obviously my current job. So for me, the key in everything that we'll be discussing today is really in the first word of the title of this webinar, which is the word conscious. And if you look at the word conscious, it actually comes from the word Latin to know, or with knowledge, right? And when you Google it, it says aware of and responding to one's surroundings. And I'll tell you why that's so important. For me, it's really important because it's only from this awareness of ourselves and our environment that we are able to change it. Yeah, because it requires knowledge about its current state, seeing what is actually right in front of you to know what it is that you would actually like to change. And as we just said, that begins with the self. That's where it all begins. So from this, what I've really done is I've derived 3 lessons from my personal experiences in leading that I think are incredibly important if you want to lead and if you want to impact your environment. So the first one is self-awareness. You need to increase your self-awareness. If you want to lead, you have to get as self-aware as you possibly can. This is absolutely vital, because only if you are aware of what it is that you are putting out there, can you actively influence what the other person is receiving and experiencing, right? Without the self-awareness, this is impossible to lead. And I've learned that this is, for me, the absolute starting point of successful leadership, because it allows people to relate to you. And self-awareness is really the ability to identify your own feelings and intentions, knowing what is happening inside of you, and our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, they all guide our behaviors, right? So to make sure we lead in the best possible way, you need to get as clear as you can on what it is that is actually going on inside of you. So when it comes to leading and training yourself as a leader, there's 2 questions that I try to ask myself all the time to become as self-aware as possible as a leader. And the first question I ask myself is, why am I taking the lead? And this question is all about checking in with my intentions at that specific moment in time. So am I taking the lead because I'm trying to help the other person to the best of my capabilities, which is what it should be? Or am I actually taking the lead for a need of control, right? Am I afraid of not being able to control the situation And am I taking the lead from a source of frustration? That sort of feeling of where you go like, "Ah, come on, just do this or work with me." And it's almost coming from a sense of frustration, which is what comes out when you feel like you are losing oversight. Another type of leadership you very often see, especially in the corporate environment, is people that actually want to show others what a great leader they are. So I don't know, maybe they want to get a promotion or something around that. And this can be very ego driven, showing your environment who's the boss. Often these people will try to rule by fear, putting others down to look better themselves, which might sometimes do the job, but you will be only listened to because people fear you, which means that people won't approach you when they have a problem because they're scared of you. So always check your intention, because only if your intention is to help others should you actually take the lead, from my experience. Now that's the first question, right? Why am I taking the lead? The second question I'm asking myself is, what am I doing that is making my environment respond like this? What am I doing that is making my environment respond like this? And this one is all about taking extreme ownership of your own behavior, because that's the only thing you can effectively change. So as a leader, people will look at you. They look at you all the time, and they probably would look at you more than at others. And almost everything you do and every action you undertake will be seen in the light of you as the leader. And this will also lead to a certain response from them, right? From their environment. It's action and it's reaction. Those two come together. So whenever, and this can be applied one-on-one, but also in a group setting, when things aren't going the way you were hoping for, or you see that people are fearful, or they are intimidated, or they say you're unapproachable, or they feel you're soft or you're weak, or whatever it is, don't blame your environment, because they are simply responding to what it is that they are picking up from you. I can give you a short example about this. So for example, on this trip, I only coach half the group. And these sessions seem to be going well. I was having intimate and personal conversations besides talking about entrepreneurial things. And I'm also doing the workshops. So I did these for the whole group and it went well and we got good feedback. So I thought, well, all fine, right? I got a good relationship. However, after a conversation with my fellow program director, I realized that I only really had personal conversations with the people who were on my side of the tribe in terms of coaching. And there were a couple of people on the other half who I wasn't coaching, who I didn't really have a personal conversation with yet. And my fellow program director told me that she got the impression that some people may have felt intimidated by me. So initially I just thought, well, that's weird. Like, I'm having good conversations with people. It's all fine. They're simply wrong that I'm intimidating. But on the other hand, it sort of stung me a little bit. Like, what is it that doesn't make them feel safe to actually reach out to me? So after sort of thinking about it, it started to dawn on me, which is that I didn't realize that most of them had only seen me in a group setting. And I wasn't aware enough of my own, of the way I was presenting myself, especially in this group setting. And I'm also not the smallest person. I'm quite tall. So when doing a workshop, I can be a little bit sometimes overpowering or convincing when I do a workshop. And they had only seen me in this sort of dominant way, verbally and non-verbally. So fast forward a couple of days later, we had a meditation retreat with the whole group. And we ended this with this 1 hour long sitting silent meditation. And I realized that I had to actively show a different side of me publicly if I was going to connect with everyone in the tribe. So afterwards, we had a group discussion about our experiences at the retreat. And I decided to share with the whole group how I would like to connect with everyone in the tribe. And that my image of dominance or intimidation was not a reflection of my thoughts of them. So yeah, saying this out loud really served as an invitation for them to come and speak to me. And really from that moment onwards, I saw that relationships started to slowly change. And apparently people thought that I was more approachable than I thought I initially was. So ask yourself these two questions over and over again. Why am I taking the lead? And what am I doing that is making my environment respond like this. You will increase your self-awareness by doing this, and you will only also slowly start to see that your environment will start to behave differently as well, and that certain dynamics that you thought were set in stone can actually be changed. And I think we all do this. We have certain relationship where we think like, oh, he or she's just like that, or oh, whenever we have an interaction, I keep feeling the same tension, right? Take extreme ownership of it and go back to yourself and say, what is it that I am doing? And that has helped me a lot. So let's move on. The second thing I wanted to talk about was authenticity, how you need to speak from your authentic self. And I'll explain why. The first thing is that as a leader, it's incredibly important you create a safe environment, because only in a safe environment can people thrive and experiment without the fear of being shut down. It allows people to develop a growth mindset, right? Fail at things, learn from it, move on, as opposed to being punished for trying. And when they feel safe in your proximity, only then will they know that they can come to you if they have a problem or an issue, right? So one of the easiest ways to make people feel safe is by being consistent in your behavior. And that's actually where the authenticity comes in. So the easiest way, and arguably the only way, to always be as consistent as possible is by being as authentic as you can be. And that's simply because your authentic self is always with you, right? It's literally always there. You can't get away from it. So if you are brave enough to always show your authentic self as a leader, you always have a central, undisputed source on which to base your behavior. Because it is impossible to keep up a fake persona over an extended period of time. You'll simply not be able to do that, and you will be found out. So by being authentic, you are also leading by example, because that's where you create an environment where people feel safe to take off what I like to call their corporate masks, right? To show themselves and stop pretending like they're absolutely fine and got it all under control. However, leading in an authentic way is also very scary sometimes, and you have to be willing to show a certain vulnerability. And I had this the other day actually, where something happened on the trip, and it made me pretty angry and frustrated because I felt like I was under attack. So I asked for a one-on-one conversation with this person, and in my own anger, I was going to tell them exactly all the things that they'd done wrong, right? And X, Y, Z. But as I was doing that, and as I was preparing for the conversation, I sort of realized two things. The first thing was that if I was going to come from that place, then this person would never get the message because they'd feel under attack just like I did. And the second thing is that they will never come to me ever again if they have another problem, because I shut them down basically for raising an issue. So instead, I got my pen and paper out and I wrote down the following 3 words: upset, disappointed, and painful. And with all these 3 things, I wrote down what it was that made me feel that way. So as the conversation started, I said how I felt and why. And this felt super vulnerable at that moment in time because it didn't portray me as a strong leader, the traditional version, at all. But to my great relief, and also to my expectation in theory, sort of, the other person actually completely accepted this and they actually apologized. And from there, we had one of the best conversations I've had on this trip so far. And we both learned so much more about ourselves and why we did what we did. So yes, I definitely strongly believe that authenticity is vital, especially in moments where things are at stake. So we've talked about increasing your self-awareness and the importance of authenticity. The last thing I wanted to touch upon is something that has personally changed my life. And I promise that it will also make a difference in the development of your awareness and also the ability for you to tap into your sense of authenticity. What I'm talking about is reflection. I would highly recommend each and every one of you to develop a reflective practice. And for those of you who already do this daily, you know how much an impact this can actually have on you. So What do I mean by reflective practice, right? Really, I'm talking about things like meditation, mindfulness, journaling, going for a long walk on your own, whatever it is that works for you, and doing this on a daily basis. And ideally, you would combine multiple, because really, I would say the more the better. And it was quite interesting. A couple of months ago, I was reading this book. It's called Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. And in this book, he speaks to over 200 of the most successful people in all kinds of disciplines. Now, I don't know if you read the book, and personally, I didn't necessarily get too much out of it, besides the fact that I think some people seem to have 29 hours in their days looking at their morning and evening routines, and that I should take cold showers, which I hate. But the biggest thing I got from it was that over 80% of these 200 high-class performers all had one thing in common. And that was that they have a daily meditation and mindfulness practice. And I couldn't really agree more. So what I would recommend for everyone here is to ask themselves a question, which is, how do I reflect, right? And start experimenting with it. Stick to it. It will feel hard in the beginning, but it will change the thing. It will really change how you go about your life. And by reflecting on a daily basis, it will get way easier to be authentic because you're calmer. And that means you'll feel more resilient and you feel more confident to actually show yourself. And your awareness will significantly increase because you are processing all the things that happened to you that day, and also what it made you feel like. So that was basically it from me. I'll give you a very quick summary of what I actually mentioned. So the first thing, work on your self-awareness to have better conversations. And to do this, ask yourself 2 questions. Why am I taking the lead? And what am I doing that is making my environment respond like this? So take extreme ownership of your behavior. The second thing, work on your authenticity. To get the best out of people, they need to feel safe. To make people feel safe, your your behavior needs to be consistent. And the easiest way to do that is by being authentic. So your authentic self is something that's always there with you, and it's something that people always can relate to. And the easiest way to be authentic is to work and lead on things that actually have meaning and purpose to you. And the last thing, to have a reflective practice. Figure out how you reflect. Is it in silence, by meditation? Is it by writing in your journal? Maybe you're a verbal reflector. Get your voice recorder out, start talking, get a coach, get a mentor. And through reflection, you will get to know yourself better, increase your self-awareness, your emotional intelligence, and basically your authentic self. So that's it from me and my experience on the trip so far.
Great, thank you. Maybe we can see if anyone has a question before we move to Kate. And,
yeah, of course.
We would encourage you to ask via the Q&A below. And we have can everyone see this feature below? We are gonna wait like a few seconds to see if any question comes. Otherwise, Kate starts with her piece.
No questions. That's good.
Questions? Are you there? Are you there? Can you just send me a message on chat to guarantee that you can hear us? Anyone? Nicole, I know you're there. Great, Sanat. Okay, nice. Great.
There you go, comprehensive.
Good. Okay.
Great. So maybe we can move and leave the questions to the end.
Totally. Thank you, Stephen. Amazing that 1:30 a.m. in the morning. Kind of amazing all at once.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm going to pick up and tell you all a little bit about how On Purpose models leadership, I suppose. Really interesting to hear from Stephen and Nomad on the kind of the 3 things that he's just pulled out. So self-awareness, authenticity, and reflection. And all of those really important to the work that we do with On Purpose as well. Yeah, I think what I'd like to point out first is how we work with purpose, and what that kind of means to us, and what type of leadership we think belongs with that type of, I suppose, that type of perspective on the world. So On Purpose, like Nomad, we start from the individual, and we interweave the individual with this concept of purpose, hence our name. And purpose to us is having a goal that is higher than yourself, the cause to serve that's bigger than yourself. And I think we talk as a culture a lot about kind of self-fulfillment, about leadership, about being, fulfilling all the things that you want, having a great career, having, houses and cars and whatever. I think that's where kind of On Purpose takes a slightly different view of kind of, I suppose, what success is, what leadership is, kind of what we all might want to be kind of aiming towards, throughout our careers and throughout our lives. So the kind of the philosophical view of purpose, I think was initiated by Aristotle and then developed by Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And this ties kind of self-fulfillment, I suppose, to finding and pursuing purpose. And Maslow actually argues later in his life around his hierarchy of needs that self-fulfillment is only achieved when you actually pursue purpose. So hopefully a few of you will know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's kind of the pyramid that talks about how your different needs kind of get built one on top of the other. And at the very bottom are our physiological needs. Those must be met in order for us to achieve safety-related needs. That comes next. Then there's love or belonging, then esteem, and then up to something called self-actualization, which is the ability to fulfill your potential. And that can only be achieved when you've got all those kind of bottom pieces in place. I think as a culture, we think a lot about kind of this self-actualization as being able to fulfill our purpose, as kind of fulfill our potential as kind of the highest piece. But later in life, Maslow actually revisited his pyramid and he added another peak. So he added to the very top something called self-transcendence. And he described that as the kind of the very highest and the most holistic level of human consciousness, as it behaves and relates to people and to things wider than oneself. So to your significant others, to human beings in general, to other species, to nature and to the cosmos. And so this transcendence of the self, kind of going beyond potential and actually finding that purpose outside of yourself, is the final building block of the pyramid. And it's here that really achieving happiness or satisfaction with life sits, and with it the kind of the full fulfillment of one's potential. So I think as I said, we see this through our culture with people achieving wealth and power and still finding they're reaching for something more. I think we find that in the people that we work with through On Purpose as well. So people who've forged successful careers, but they're still looking for the missing piece. And that's the kind of the purpose that we work towards. And so On Purpose works, from this kind of self, and we very much bring in the kind of the self-awareness that Stephen was talking about. Authenticity is totally key, and we make time for reflection as well, as that's kind of really important to really understanding your sense of self as a person. And then once, I suppose, around our vision of leadership as an individual, we then work towards our vision of leadership for organizations, and then also at a systemic level. So I'm going to chat you a little bit through that, which hopefully is helpful. And so, firstly, crucial to be able to lead oneself, and to develop that leadership through curiosity, through honesty with yourself, and through the people that you know well. So that real kind of self-awareness piece, that being honest, sometimes brutally honest with yourself, being really curious and ensuring that you kind of step out of that comfort zone, and really understand how it is that other people kind of appreciate you, and those kind of patterns and easy way of doing things, which we all slip into. Making sure that authentic self is able to come through, rather than kind of pretending up to a vision of leadership that you might have kind of seen externally, but no, kind of isn't true to your own values. And I think Yeah, we build this in through kind of our learning and development program for a few different things. So there's tools such as MBTI, so really understanding kind of how you work and how you might work in groups of other people, really understanding those kind of points of difference. Once you're able to see how it is that others kind of appreciate the world, you're then much better able to work kind of within a group and understand your place in it, the pieces at which you're really strong, and the pieces at which other people might bring their strengths as well. And then we have, there's a real piece of self-reflection as well, which I think is so important. And that's, I suppose, comes through individual work, but also really nice to do that in a peer group. It sounds as though this happens really nicely with the tribes of Nomad, and we work with cohorts of between kind of 16 and 18 people at the time, kind of those that little tribe to kind of go on this journey with you. And they're super supportive in all of this work. And then we work with mentors and with coaches. So having access to an executive coach just really gives you the space to understand yourself, understand how you relate to your values, understand how you kind of want to use a year on a program, or, the amount of time you have to really focus on yourself and where you want to take them. We then build, so on top of the kind of view of the individual, we like to think about organizations. So we see the change we want to see in the world is this movement towards an economy that works better for everyone. And so we look to how we can work better with organizations, because organizations are made up of groups of people. So how do we go about influencing those? How do we go about leading teams and leading organizations, whether they be kind of charities, whether they be in the more profit-led space? How do we really understand that? And how do we use those groups of people to create that change? And I think it's particularly important when you start thinking about purpose, when you're thinking about impact organizations who are trying to do something positive in the world. So often we, in this space, care so much and put so much energy into the people we're trying to impact on, into the environment we're trying to impact on. And it's very easy to forget yourself in that, leading to burnout, leading to frustration. I think it's key to be really, really kind of aware of that, and always just try and balance that out. Always difficult, because it's the stuff you really think about, but kind of pulling that back, having that self-awareness, as Stephen said, taking that walk, doing whatever it you need to do to reflect on the way that you've interacted with the world, and whether that feels like it's in the right place or not is kind of super important. We work through all sorts of different types of session around organizational development and culture, how you can set culture, how you can try and shift it. It's difficult, but it's possible to kind of move a culture to a more kind of positive and more useful place. And we also think about different types of management and leadership style as well. You might have heard of a book called Reinventing Organizations, which talks a lot about different ways of managing different types of hierarchies, and in fact, lots of organizational types that try and avoid hierarchy. And those kind of different concepts pull in alongside our focus really on how all of this might create impact. And then we work also with a few more kind of consulting type skills, I suppose, in order to allow all of the people we work with to work effectively within organizations. So not only do you need to try and put that culture to be in the right place, but you also need to bring the tools to help you be effective in the work that you do and give you that ability to lead, allow you to build that credibility. And so there's a particular focus on problem solving, how you can break down, an issue you might be facing into the constituent parts, how you can kind of look at each of those interdependently, how you can prioritize your work to be most efficient, most effective, and then be able to kind of bring people behind you, influence them to lead the change that you're hoping to create. And then once we think about organizations in terms of that level of group of people, On Purpose really thinks also about systems, and how as individuals, as organizations, as collaborative partners, we sit within networks in a real place of complexity, and how using a systems way of thinking can enable us to create more robust change. And so systems thinking, it's quite trendy at the moment. There's all sorts of people talking about it and thinking about it. It's quite a complex way of thinking. And so I brought a little kind of anecdote as to how you might understand systems. And it's illustrated by a very old parable, I think comes out of India, about the blind man and the elephant. And each of these blind men, I don't know, there's 3 or 4 or 5, and each of them interact with a different part of the elephant. But they crucially only interact with one part of it. And so the blind man who feels the elephant's trunk explains that the elephant is like a thick snake. The blind man who feels the elephant's tusk explains that the elephant is like a spear. And the one who feels the tail explains that the elephant is like a strong rope. And so, of course, all of these people are correct, but they've only seen one piece of that much more complex puzzle, and they can only draw really limited conclusions. And so, as in the story, as in life, there are, real complex challenges, and these are some of the problems that the organisations we work with and our associates are trying to bring change and bring solutions to. Things like the climate emergency we're now facing, poverty as an enormous global issue, plastics in the oceans. All of these bring together a complex kind of network of actors and influence. They bring together these patterns of behaviour and interactions that are really far beyond our control. So we know that solving these real wicked problems is really necessary to create that fair and sustainable economy that we're all seeking. But many attempts at that change fail, with responses being siloed, a bit like those blind men all touching one part of the elephant but unable to see the greater piece. We find that lots of kind of change in this space is rather myopic in its focus, and it fails precisely because it's focusing on the tail or it's focusing on the tusk, but it's not focusing on the whole elephant. And so we like to use systems thinking as an approach to these wicked problems, because it allows us a more holistic place to start, and allows us access to working in a different way. I think it acknowledges there are similarities across all of these really complex problems. There's no single actor that's creating or perpetuating the issue. There isn't a single root cause. The challenge is always evolving, it's never staying still, and it's perpetuated by behaviours or approaches that are really entrenched. They've been there for a long time, they serve the status quo. It means that they are sticky, they are complicated. It's really hard to shift. And so by using this systems thinking, we're able to understand how a system interrelates, and it gives us access to the different points of leverage, so the different areas where you might be able to tweak something, and it's going to have that networked impact on all the different pieces of the problem. And it's the actors and the different points of leverage that might make some of this problem solving really stick. So the first action in all of this is to map a system, to really trying to get to grips with all the different pieces that sit within it. And so, you can take homelessness, you can take any of these problems and start to really look at them as kind of symptoms rather than causes, and start to put together which different pieces of the system as an economy, the system as a society is pulling in to create this combination of things that creates homelessness, and start to understand it, map it out, and then that starts to give you the access to it's the different leverage points that you might then be able to pull on, and actually, start to get a bit of movement. Who are the actors you need to be working with? Which are the real priority problems that you need to start trying to make some impact on in order to try and change this larger whole? And of course, how will that single change then start to impact on all the different parts of the network? And how do you ensure that that one piece of positive looking change doesn't actually have a negative impact on the whole? So I mean, this is a challenging thing to do. It's really important as a way of thinking, as a mindset, for On Purpose and for each of our associates as we grapple with some of the social and environmental problems that we're trying to influence. It's a really important toolkit for creating that lasting change. And I'm not sure we can say that we're able to make our associates like experts in systems during our time with us, but we would like to introduce them to this way of working, enabling them to use this mindset, and to really explore the kind of the issues that are important to them. And I suppose that's where I'd pull together all the different pieces of the On Purpose puzzle, I suppose, and that's how we really kind of think about leadership, it starts with you. It starts with being authentic. It starts with being self-aware. And once you're able to do that piece yourself, then you have the opportunity to start looking outwards. Look out to the organisation you work within, look towards the system in which that organisation operates, and then always kind of circling back. So making sure you have those feedback loops that enable you to come back to yourself, to check in when things feel as though they're not quite as peachy as you would hope. Or like Stephen this week, kind of getting that bit of external feedback that you didn't expect or that felt uncomfortable, and really figure out where that's coming from. How does that relate yourself to the situation that you've been in, and then start to be able to kind of radiate out, I suppose. Once you can lead yourself, I think you're in a much better position to kind of lead organizations and lead systems. And I think my final point is that leading, I think sometimes is in, it's in book titles and it's TED Talks and it's things that feel quite distant from ourselves. And I suppose the joy of working on the associate program is working with a lot of individual people who find that within themselves, and they come in with different senses of leadership and whether they are a leader, whether they could ever become a leader, and breaking that down into those nice little categories is just a really nice way to start seeing that all of us can be leaders. You don't need to be wearing, the hat that says leader on it. You don't need to be at the top of an organization. And actually, when we're looking at these big and complex problems, it's even more important that we have people leading themselves in an authentic way at every level, ensuring that, that they're pulling in their best, they're pulling in their ability to work on these challenges. Leading themselves, whether they're the CEO, whether they're the assistant, it doesn't matter. It's all just about, starting from yourself and looking outwards. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Would you like to, I don't know if you would like to say anything, Stephen, before we open to the Q&A?
No, I mean, I very much agree. And I think especially that last point, like when you start working from a sense of purpose and you figured out a need that is, that feels like so vital to you and seems to be ticking at the core of who you are, that's really where you need to get to. And that's the sort of core sense that you need to tap into. And you get to a point from there where you almost feel like it's impossible not to take the lead on it. And it doesn't matter if you're a leader, but you're leading by your behavior, right? And I mean, there is actually a great TED Talk that says the first follower turns the lone nut into a leader. Right? All you need to do is start tapping into that source of where you feel like this is a need and this has to change, and just start acting on it. And from there, you'll see that other people start following and suddenly you're a leader, right? That's how it works. But yeah, so I very much agree.
Yeah, and I think every moment is a moment to take a lead in the small things that we decide in our lives, that we people, that we work. I think everyone is leading every day while taking decisions, and
definitely. And I think it's amazing how we've seen things like Extinction Rebellion kind of spring up in the UK with all sorts of people kind of leaning into that, and kind of taking a lead in their communities, kind of doing whatever. And you see everyone from kids through the school strike, kind of playing into that, through kind of mums and dads through to grandparents, all having decided that this is the thing that they really care enough to fight for. And that can be incredibly powerful. I think we saw it probably mostly in London, but I hope that we'll start seeing it kind of nationally and globally kind of soon as well.
Yeah.
Great. So now we have 10 minutes before the webinar ends. So we would like to open for questions.
Baffled everyone, or if anyone has anything to ask.
Yeah, hopefully. Because we would like that to be a conversation, but this webinar does not allow us to see you, so please write something.
Yeah. And feel free to ask anything, like either about leadership, about the things we talked about, but also if you have any specific questions about the program, more than willing to answer.
Absolutely. I should plug that we are recruiting for our October 19 cohort at the moment. So if you're interested in coming and working with us, then applications are open until the end of next weekend. So in the UK, it's a bank holiday on Monday, the 27th of May. So we're open until midnight. And yeah, looking forward to seeing if there's anyone on the webinar who decides to make an application.
Yeah, sure. I see that we have a question.
We have a question.
Yeah, from Nicole. Thank you for asking. Yes, okay. I'll read it out. So you talked about being very self-reflective and seeing yourself as the cause of your external actions. How can this not lead to self-criticism in order to stay confident, and how much correlation actually exists between self-confidence and leadership? Yeah, self-criticism is a huge one, of course. It's a big part of who we are. I think you don't have to be a leader to sometimes be self-critical, right? I think we all have this little green fella on our shoulder who's telling us that we're not good enough. But that's really the challenge, right? I mean, regardless of if you're leading or not, self-criticism exists. And the more self-reflective you become, yes, you might find some flaws in your own behavior. But from there, again, it's up to you. It's a decision, right? Am I going to engage with it? And am I going to let it put me down? Or am I going to listen to it and say, thank you, I got the message, and from there move on? Okay, so if this is my self-criticism, how can I learn from it? How can I move beyond it, right? And that's really where what we call a growth mindset comes in, where you feel like you're being put down and you go, okay, this is where I am. How can I move forward from it? And from there, you'll start to notice that every time you feel like you're under attack, or you feel like people are saying things that you don't like being said about you, very often you'll notice that these are the exact same things you tell yourself, right? The things we don't like other people saying about us, or the things we say about others that we don't like, very often these are things we don't like about ourselves. And that is why you need to be self-reflective, why you need to look into what it is that you're doing. And from there, you can start moving forward. But if you're only responsive to what's happening inside of you, then you're never in charge, right? You're basically like a ball that's being thrown from left to right because of the environment they're in. And how much correlation there actually exists between self-confidence and leadership, I think it's quite big. But what I do think, and this is where the authenticity comes in, it's so much easier to be self-confident if you talk about things that actually matter to you. It's way easier. If you talk about things, if you're talking from a sense of passion and from a certain drive, then taking the lead on something is 10 times easier. It will just happen, right? And sure, you can get better over time, and there's tons of theories that are super important, and there's you know, the tips and tricks. But I strongly believe personally, if you talk from a sense of self, people listen. And that's for me really the correlation between self-confidence and leadership, is that you talk from a sense of self that is developed and authentic. I hope that answers questions. Maybe in the chat you could say yes or no. If that answers it for you.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because you're right. Everyone has this kind of gremlin on their shoulder, and I think surrounding yourself with really great people can really help with this. I think so many people, everyone feels the kind of imposter syndrome. Everyone worries about what that external kind of version of themselves is, and can take things to heart and can really sit and self-criticize. So I think, some of the self-awareness, I think, is being able to look at your thoughts, I suppose, from more of a logical kind of way. So if you actually surface them and start asking them to yourself and just say, would anybody else say that to you? And if they did, would you kind of respect them? Would you want to engage with them? I think you find that there's a lot in there that is just kind of pings around in your head, but doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean anything kind of to the external world. And we know we can be horrible bullies to ourselves, and we do need to be really aware of that and kind of pull in some of this. It's now very trendy to be like self-care. But you need to be kind to yourself, particularly when you're trying to work on big challenging problems. It's hard. It's not going to be kind of easy. You're not going to find all the answers immediately. I think Stephen's point of talking from a point of passion is really important as well. I think that, hopefully gives you confidence, if you can allow yourself to be vulnerable in that space and know that nobody has the answers to lots of these kind of very big, very challenging questions, then, you know, you're able to collaborate rather than needing to be the kind of the leader wearing the hat that says leader and has to be in charge. And actually finding a place of collaboration where you're working with a group of people who believe in the same thing as you and are able to kind of help you make that journey as they make that journey themselves, I think is really important too.
Great. Yeah, and that reminds me of a poem that says that our greatest fear is our light, not our darkness. And I think sometimes this is true. I think sometimes it's in our society, we tend to always like see what's missing. What should I do better? How should I produce more? How should I fix this? And how like you study and then you don't value the subjects that you do great, but we always see, oh, I should be better in this. So I think also being leader relates a lot about knowing yourself, and as you mentioned, knowing what you're passionate about and moving on.
Leaning into your strengths and allowing them to kind of define the work that you do rather than just trying to fill in the holes the whole time. Because there's always going to be people who are maybe better than you at a specific skill, and that's totally fine because they can go off and do it brilliantly without having to think about it half as hard. So, you know, what can you bring to the conversation, which doesn't mean you sit there like I would have to, like squirreling away on Excel, trying desperately to be better at it.
Yeah. And I think also just in general with self-criticism, like what's your alternative, right? Sure, you can go and listen to it and engage with it all the time. Like, how does that work out for you then? And I know that's a bit harsh, but it is true, right? Like at a certain point, you have to make that decision that you decide to start moving forwards. And if you feel like that's a great pain, there is a lot of energy there. And that's actually use that energy to drive it forward and to make it actually better. But I see you just said, you're nodding a lot of yes, so that's very helpful. Just good.
Great. And I wrote down the name of the poem on the chat for greatest fear, Marianne Williamson, if you want an inspiration.
Nice.
I have 1 minute to end. So maybe thank you, you both, and I hope all of you enjoyed, and you can join other webinars in the future with us. And when the webinar like as soon as it finishes, you will receive a link to complete a survey, and it will help a lot if you could do that, so that we can understand how to make it even better. And I don't know, any ideas would be great.
Yeah. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. Steven at nomad.academy. STEVEN. So if you have any other follow-up questions or you want to reach out for whatever, just feel free to reach out on email or LinkedIn for that matter.
Yeah, and we are contact@onpurpose.org. And yeah, our website's @onpurpose.org. So go and have a look and send us a message if you've got any questions too.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone. Sleep well, Steven.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.